welcome to Leading Entrepreneurs of the World. My name is Glenn Turansky, and I'm a member of the advisory board here at One Business World. Leading Entrepreneurs of the World features entrepreneurs, founders, business leaders, all presenting on cutting-edge topics and the latest industry developments. Today, we are very pleased to welcome corporate leader, leadership coach, and entrepreneur, Rebecca Ahmed. Rebecca is the corporate managing director for the Savills Corporation in the Washington, D.C. office. Rebecca focuses on working with clients to develop occupancy solutions that optimize their portfolio strategy in alignment with their business goals. Rebecca comes with about 10 plus years of experience in the area of human resources from the hospitality industry, from her time with Pinnacle Gaming, Allegiant Travel, as well as hotels in Las Vegas and New York City. As a people services expert, she knows that our future generation of leaders thrive best in diverse cultures of growth mindset. Organizations can reduce turnover, increase retention, and enhance productivity by fostering experiences to challenge their workforces while creating balance for them to enjoy their journey just as much as their success. Rebecca is a certified energy leadership coach with the International Coaching Federation. She's an author, speaker, and has taken her expertise and launched her own business, Laugh Through Life, where she brings energy and joy to the workplace and is a recognized expert in talent acquisition, culture, diversity, and inclusion, all very important topics. Rebecca is going to be speaking to us today about the future of commercial real estate, as well as the workplace and the impact on the workforce here in the COVID-19 times that we're in, as well as some diversity and inclusivity issues as well. So Rebecca, we're very excited to have you today, and we're looking forward to hearing more about your career, your current business, and all of your insights here in the world of occupancy as well as human resource management. So welcome.
Thank you so much for the introduction. And I will still share my screen now. Here we go. All right, so welcome everyone. Very excited to chat with you all today. We're going to be discussing the future of workplace, and as Glenn mentioned, we'll discuss everything from diversity and inclusion to human resources and how that's impacting the future of workplace when we really look at it from a people perspective. And you'll hear that consistently today from me, as we're always looking at this from a people perspective. There we go. Perfect. So Glenn provided you an overview of my background. As he mentioned, I do come from human resources. I've been in the hospitality sector and travel sector for about 10 plus years, growing Allegiant Travel Company, opening the Cosmopolitan of Las Vegas, and then overseeing a $2.8 billion M&A with Pinnacle to Penn and Boyd Gaming. And I found working with people and constantly opening up new offices and opening up new hotels and locations, there was an opportunity to really bridge the gap between those who use your space and how your space is utilized. And so I took that opportunity to launch my own business, Laugh Through Life, where I do focus on human resource needs, culture, diversity, inclusion, everything people-centric. But in addition, worked with Savills, and I'm a corporate managing director at Savills, to really help organizations as they define their space and build out new spaces, to really make sure they're connected with their people. And does their space really help them retain talent and propel their culture? At the end of the day, that's what you want. Who's using your space? Your people. So thank you, Glenn, for the warm introduction and a little bit overview about me. So today, before we jump into space, we're going to do a little bit of a history check and make sure everyone really understands the different generations that I'm going to discuss and why this is so important as we look at the future of workplace. I am loving right now, so many people, especially those in organizations, those in commercial real estate, are trying to forecast the future of workplace. But one element that I really see being missed is, where have we come from and where are we going? And let's talk about the future generation who's going to be using the space. And so if you think about historically baby boomers, they were born traditionally 1946 to 1964. And I think it's so important to point out the population size, because the population size really dictates how historically we've run our office spaces. So baby boomers were huge, 80 million people. They have a large influence in our workplace. And then Gen X didn't get as much because they were only about 60 million, and we'll dive into some of the differences between 1965 and 1980, what this generation wanted from their space and from their workplace. And then I'm sure everyone's had millennial fatigue. I am a millennial myself, and even me hearing that term, I'm like, oh gosh, what now? But we are 82 large, and so we've had a huge impact on space. And it's really been a driving factor of kind of where we are today. However, the opportunity is to really now start tapping into the next generation, which is Generation Z, which will be 72 million people large. And they're very different than millennials. And a lot of organizations haven't really had them impact their workplace too much yet because they're just starting to be around 23, 24 years old. Coming from hospitality and also seeing that in retail, they have had a large impact, but a lot of other areas have not. And so it's about getting ahead of this and understanding their desires and how they want to be attractive as candidates and how they want to be retained and how we can use the space moving forward. So let's look at the baby boomers. So as I said, 80 million deep, and they really wanted big offices, welcome, almost like a second home, you know, welcome to my corner office. When you have a group that large, they were very competitive. If you look at historically baby boomers, it's, you know, everything was transparent in terms of who was the top performer. You wanted that corner office, that was your trophy. Everyone got to see that. It was very much part of the culture to say, if you become partner, you get this. It was a reward, and your office really spoke to who you were. And baby boomers really set that foundation. And you'll see, because we still have baby boomers in the workforce quite heavily, we still have those corner offices that are desired. However, as generations have come in, we've kind of stripped back those wooden walls of privacy where it's all become glass now. So you can still see that that's something of desire, but it's also creating a space that's a little bit more welcoming, which we'll dive into with Gen X. So Gen X, being a smaller generation, really looked at an opportunity to incorporate work-life balance. They looked at the baby boomers saying, gosh, work is so part of their culture. However, we want to balance more of the home environment. And so Gen X really tried to ask for, can we have a home office? Can we have a little bit more of collaboration spaces? They brought in the amenities of spaces. If you look historically where amenities came into workforce, Gen X was that driving force. They wanted the gyms, they wanted the kitchens, they wanted different things to really balance the environment and culture of an organization with their workforce. It wasn't just work, work, work. They are competitive as well. I would say a little less than baby boomers just because their size was so large, wasn't as large, but they definitely wanted to create that balance. And I think that's the biggest takeaway from Gen X. Now, millennials, we really wanted collaborative workspaces. And this is where you started to see walls really be pulled down. Well, you'll still see those baby boomer offices and places, and you'll still see the amenities that Gen Z really wanted, but millennials became collaborative. And I think it's really important to point out, most millennials, their parents were baby boomers. So when you have a group so large like baby boomers and they focused on work so heavily, the small amount of time that they did get to spend with their millennial children, they really, really pumped them up. You can do whatever you want, your dreams, anything is possible, follow your passions. This is where participation trophies came in place versus competitiveness. And this is why you see such a collaborative workforce and such a collaborative office space, because it wasn't about the I win, it was about the we win. And this is the big focus of millennials. And being 82 million large, that's why it's constantly right now spoken about, is this is how the workforce has been, where is it going to go? And it's very interesting to kind of take a step back and see, it's very unique that COVID hit right when we're having such a transition in workplace anyway, because you're going to start seeing boomers retire, millennials still be a very large prominent force of the workforce, but now Gen Z is coming in, and Gen Z already had differences from millennials, especially the collaborative piece is a very unique thing to millennials. So how will we take the impact of COVID and cleanliness and safety and wellness and the Gen Z aspect of less collaboration and make that into the office space. So that really takes us to Generation Z. And Generation Z is primarily raised by Gen X. So we talked about the smaller group, that 62 million who wanted to really balance work-life balance, make sure that they have amenities. It's not so focused on just an office space. These are their parents. And so it really speaks to how they want to come into the workforce. And so I'm going to take some time here and really dive into Gen Z before we look at what the future of workplace will look like. So Gen Z is by far the most diverse generation, with 1/3 of the population being diverse. And we'll talk about what that means to an organization and how they take that statistic and transcend it into the workplace. Gen Z is the first generation that completely grew up with technology. They never had to go into the library with the Dewey Decimal System like I did and check out a book and look it up. They always had access to technology. And I find this very important because it's not just technology, it's the internet, it's social media. And David and Johan Stillman, they wrote an amazing book called Gen Z at Work. And they talk about this being phygital is a word that they use. And I love this word because they don't see a divide between the physical office space and the actual digital office space. And an example I can provide, a school that I work with right now, because of COVID, they've offered their classes in person. However, only 9 students can be in an actual classroom at a time. And on average, they have 20 students per class. And this speaks so much to this phygital Gen Z world. If you come to school and you don't make the first 9 that come into class who registered, no problem. You can be anywhere within the space of the school or outside of the school, and you pop into the classroom. You log right in as if you're there. And so the wall of actually being present and not present is very blurred. They don't see a difference at all in the two. And I think that's very important as we look at how space will be used in the future, because walls aren't really being seen in that sense. As I mentioned, Gen Z is primarily raised by Generation X. So they have a very, very keen, I would say, they're very in tune with the work-life balance, where family is a priority over work. And not to say work's not important, but it's how do you look at work holistically with everything in your life. Gen Z is the first one. Do-it-yourself projects are not just about rebuilding your deck. They are YouTube learners by heart. Anything they need, they say they would rather immediately go figure it out on their own versus collaborate. And that's a huge difference between millennials and Gen Z. Gen Z constantly goes and says, okay, what can I find to help me understand how to do this? Where millennials will say, let's get a group together and collaborate and discuss what are the best options to come out of this decision as a group. And that also speaks to the freelance piece of Gen Z, myself included, and I do resonate with this. We started to see it a little bit coming out of millennials, but very much more out of Gen Z, is that people have a lot of side hustles. And they don't even look at it as a side hustle. They look at it as very much that they're entrepreneurs. So you even see it right now because of COVID-19. It's the first time when you look at unemployment rates, they had to create a PUA because so many people were working for individual projects. They were contractors. And even though they might have a job with a corporation, they have their own business. And it's fascinating to see Gen Z. If you talk to so many like 16 and 18-year-olds, their first job is not the first job their parents got them out of school, where they're working for, minimum wage. They're taking a passion of theirs. They're building jewelry and selling it on Etsy. They are Uber drivers. They are making music for people. They're finding their passions and finding ways to sell this passion through social media. Completely different. Why would they start, at a job that they didn't like if they could find a passion and uniquely? And that's a very big part too, what we'll see of future generations and how they use their space. Personalization and transparency, 2 very key factors that I love have continued to transcend generation to generation. So when you look at the baby boomers office of this dark wood, mahogany, closed doors environment compared to as Gen X comes in and says, we want to see amenities and we want to be able to communicate. And the millennials saying, oh my gosh, we need to collaborate on everything. Now you have Gen Z who really wants everything to be personalized and transparent because they're used to building their own brand. Everyone has their own Instagram page, Snapchat page, TikTok page. They've been building their brand since they've been technically born, since they've been on the computer. And they want that brand very much recognized within organizations. So it's not just about the organization's culture, it's how their values align with the organization's culture. And they want it very transparent. They want pay transparency. They want feedback transparent consistently. They want to make sure they're on the same page. If you look at social media, that's what it is. When you post something on social media, immediately people are liking or commenting. That's their form of feedback, transparent feedback. And if something is not working well, then they immediately see, oh, I only received 20 likes versus someone else with 100 likes. That means that this is not as strong and not resonating as much with my clientele. So it's a constant feedback that they're going to want, and creating an office space for that. Gen Z is also more competitive versus collaborative. So mentioned that boomers, when they raise their children, millennials create this very collaborative, everyone gets a participation trophy award. Well, Gen X wasn't like that. Gen X had their feet constantly the rug pulled out from under them. So when they raised their children of Gen Z, they made it very realistic. And they said, you know, you can be a CEO, you can be this, but these are the things that we've seen consistently that have succeeded and not. And focus really on doing the best at what you want to do. Failure's okay, opportunities are okay. However, it's not as collaborative. They really do like to go do it yourself, figure out how they want to work, and get something done. Philanthropy has been a huge focus of millennials, and then transcended through Gen Z as well. You'll see this constantly when you look at organizations, and they say if you buy one pair of shoes, another pair of shoes goes to a person in need. They're constantly, you know, collaborating with philanthropies, and this is just something that's completely stuck and will continue to move forward. And then the unique part about Gen Z is that safety has become a priority. So 9/11 occurred when they were young. This is the first generation that has had to have drills within schools. Unfortunately, in the US, because of shootings in schools, it's something that's a very everyday occurrence in their mind. If you talk to anyone in Gen Z, they all understand the impact of that and going to school and the safety concerns around it. And then you have COVID. So constantly they've had these big safety concerns impact their life. And so it's top of mind for their generation, especially as you look at leaving school and going into your workspace, someplace that you want to feel safe and not take a risk. So we'll first dive into diversity. And Savills, this is our latest diversity statement. It's been a focus of ours this past 2 years, especially because it's become something that's so part of organizations' culture and the driving factor to retain talent. And not only are organizations being asked to put out their diversity statement, but they're asked to be even further, how does that influence your space? And I would love to share, I got to speak with Ioku Bethia. She did a podcast with Brene Brown, and loved connecting with her about how organizations are using their space and how they're thinking about diversity. And I got to do a webinar with Joanna Shin, and she is with MKDA. It's a design group based out of New York, but they have an office in DC. And it was fascinating to hear, as you look at diversity in spaces, what things will change. For instance, a Black background will not be the best background for people of color. They found that a lot of sinks too were created for light colored skin to be recognized, but on people of color, that actually doesn't work and it doesn't turn on the water. So there are a lot of opportunities now that people are starting to ask, diversity of thought. How is your office in, China versus India versus the US, and what can you learn from each other, and what resonates best with your clientele and your team members, and really getting diverse perspectives as you design your space, which is very unique. It used to be very much, this office was built for this location, and it's very different than our office in another location. But right now it's becoming more of this, it's almost like a mixed use, because you're hearing everyone's different perspectives. And so diversity is also becoming very, very, I would say, expanded compared to what it used to be. So ICO does a great job of saying it's not just race, gender, ethnicity, LGBT, it's also even mental health. And that's a big, big part of Generation Z. Mental health is such a focus of their generation. And so if you have any learning disabilities, you'll see a lot of changes in schools right now in how they use their space. And they're going to expect that moving forward in their office space as well. Does this office space facilitate the best amount for me to learn if I'm an auditory, learner versus, a visual learner versus a hands-on learner? And are all of those spaces represented to make sure that my diversity is really inclusive? And that's where, the next definition comes in is your space inclusive? You can have people from all different backgrounds in your space, but if your space doesn't really speak to what matters to everyone and really bring out their ideas to the table and create a welcoming environment, it's not inclusive. And that's really what's going to be super important as we look at the future of space, because it's diversity plus inclusion. So it's the perspective everyone brings, and then how can we make sure that we're innovative and leveraging everyone's ideas in our spaces? And that's what's going to be really exciting, because we're going to start seeing spaces transcend, because they're not just thinking of a check the box. It's how is diversity and inclusion part of every single decision that we make, because this generation is the most diverse and they expect it. It's not something, oh, okay, we're learning, we're kind of taking our time to understand it. No, it's very much at the forefront. And that gets us to wellness. So as we touch base on everything important in Gen Z, we talked about diversity, inclusion, and then wellness. So 90% of people's times in an office is spent indoors, and 90% of the company's cost is spent on their people. So you really want to make sure your indoors really represent wellness and create a welcoming environment for your space. And as I said, Gen Z is so unique because they've had so many of these challenges thrown at them from the beginning, and now they really understand the importance of health within their organization. They've had a global crisis, they've had safety concerns. It's not a new concept, but now it's becoming at the forefront and focus for what they want to accomplish and how they feel in their space. And that leads me to sustainability. So while wellness focuses on the human health aspects, sustainability focuses on the environmental health. How they want to know everything from the materials used to office supplies, the procurement process, ensuring that diversity, inclusion, and wellness and sustainability have all been met and requiring before you even purchase a product. And they want this transparent. This should be on companies' websites. This should be part of their recruitment process to share every single little detail to make sure as you attract and retain future talent, all of these pieces are really being discussed, because it's something that's at the forefront of Gen Z. And it's also in their consummation. So when you look at what they purchase, it's very similar to what they're doing in their workspace and what they're requiring of their employers. And it's an opportunity for organizations to really start diving down and saying, oh, we need to know everything about our building. And you're probably asking, why is this important? So when you look at dollars spent, for every dollar spent on employee wellness, medical costs decreased by $3.27. That's a huge amount that's a huge cost to organizations. And someone who's overseen benefits, it was something that I really looked at as an opportunity, because if you're able to empower your team members to be healthier, create spaces for them that support their health and wellness goals, including food, including the HVAC, including materials, you are actually able to see dollars go down that are spent in the medical area. Medical costs are so expensive for organizations. We spent an average of $1 million a week at Pinnacle, and I'm looking at that around 16,000 team members. And just by small enhancements within our spaces, we were able to see drastic decreases because our team members were living healthier lives. It also improved culture. If your workplace is empowering you and supporting you and aligning with your values, you're going to work harder. I'll never forget going to Airbnb and visiting their space, and they had that day, I think it was like wild boar ribs or something, and their executive chef was cooking for their team members, and it talked about all of the different health elements going into the lunch that was served that day. And I just loved seeing that it was such a focus of the organization, and they constantly asked for feedback to make sure that they were creating an environment that propelled the culture and really helped their team members be more productive. So when you look at all of these aspects that I discussed, wellness, sustainability, health, air quality, diversity, inclusion, you have to take everything we discussed and then put it into a program. What does that mean for your organization? What does that mean for your space? So when you break these down one by one, it really transcends to food service, well-being, activity programs, health promotions, community support. It's looking at each of these individual requirements and then making sure your organization and your space fosters that type of environment. And it sounds like a lot, but if you take each step by step, your design teams will really be able to assist you, and your tenant reps will ensure that that's something that's front of mind as you design your space and select your new space. And so what does this look like? This is the big question. So time will tell as we see organizations shifting, especially because so many organizations haven't gone back into their offices yet. This is still, a TBD for a lot of spaces. But if you start looking at schools, because a lot of schools have started to go back, you'll see these differences already. You're going to see air, natural materials, plants, this active design. Gen Z, their focus is about 8 seconds versus the national average previously, which was 12 seconds. So you constantly want to keep them moving within their space. So when they're focusing on one project, when they need to do a shift, which they do very well, they're going to want a different space for that different project. And so it's creating elements where they can go around and use rooms, private rooms, open rooms, depending on the needs of that project and what they want to accomplish. And then natural lighting, it's almost like creating that indoor-outdoor space. Because there's no such thing as a wall when you look at the phygital, you have to create spaces where if somebody doesn't want to go in the physical room, they can do that through their computers. And whether that's outside, on a park bench, that's still part of the space, or within the environment of the space, it's super important to understand that they want to feel connected. And even if it's their home office, they want to feel connected, but they also want to make sure that they have the flexibility to go wherever they want to go based on how they want to perform their work. And that's these adaptable spaces. You're going to see adaptable spaces consistently change based on the needs of this future generation. And you'll test them. And I think this is what's so amazing, for organizations, as they start really talking about feedback, not just performance reviews, but how are you enjoying the space? They'll constantly be changing these up. And I kind of like to look at it as a hotel conference room, because hotel conference rooms change for every single organization that comes in based on the needs that they want for that conference. And that's how these spaces are going to be. It's not, okay, we did this, we're done for the next 10 years. Absolutely not. That's not the future of workplace. So we'll jump into ROI and why this is so important, because at the end of the day, an organization needs to understand the dollars, right? So why are we making these changes? What's so important? And so if we look at this, this is where your money comes back to you. This is where you see every single employee costs. If you're looking at a potential probably manager and above at most organizations, you're looking at their salary plus half. So on average, let's say if your average employee makes 100,000 or even 50,000, you're looking at almost doubling that, or 70, time and a half of what they cost to retain and their turnover costs. So it's expensive. And I always challenge organizations when they say, oh, if we can save 200 square feet for these certain people, will this save us more money? And I said, what is your retention cost? What are your turnover costs? Because if you're not factoring that into construction costs, you're really missing the heartbeat of the organization, which is your people, and you're not looking at the bottom line holistically. You're just looking at one factor of a cost of an office versus how are your people using that. And it's so important to combine the two and make sure that they're aligned. So I know that was a lot at you, and Glenn, I'm sure you have lots of questions that popped up, but I'm very excited for the future of workforce and workplace and what we can take from Generation Z and our past generations as we really look to retain top talent, leverage human resources to make sure that the people who use their space really enjoy it, and foster a culture of community that they're looking for. So love to answer any questions you might have.
Thanks, Rebecca. Wow, that was fascinating. Couple points. I love the concept of amplify the power of people. What a tremendous kind of branding for just from the concept standpoint. Interesting though, because it's I get to be able to figure out where my brothers end up, which bucket they're in, why they're slightly different than me. Me being a baby boomer on the back end of that, and then also my daughters, I'm able to put them in different categories. So that is otherwise helpful. But as a baby boomer, I do miss the card catalog at the library, as well as the Dewey Decimal System. So that's what I grew up with. So it makes it kind of difficult to give it up sometimes. But you talk about sustainability and wellness, and really one of the stats you had up there, 90% of organizational cost are people cost. That's remarkable. And then when you look at the savings that comes from that, and then the return on that savings, because as you said, people will come back and they'll say, oh, why are we doing this investment? The payback is certainly down the line. As you look at just whether it was absenteeism, employee satisfaction, and the like. I mean, to me, a lot of what you kind of described kind of sounds like resiliency. So I was curious, as you go through these occupancy solutions and things, and as you talk with some of your customers and you get feedback on the new space, does resiliency play a part in what you do?
Absolutely. I mean, if you think about COVID right now, we're having to be resilient in this environment. And it's a big focus of organizations. However, I like to, and this could be the millennial in me, but I like to take the concept of resiliency and saying, how can we re-energize the organization? I don't want to just be resilient. Organizations don't just want to be resilient. They want to thrive. And before COVID, they were really talking about innovation was the #1 characteristic looked at for talent. And that's not just resiliency, that's energy to thrive and to make changes moving forward. So I think it's very important to do both. Reflect right now and where are you being resilient and how have you buckled down this last year and what's worked, but then take surveys from your team members and say, how do you want to take this and propel forward? Because we don't want to just be in a resilient space. We want to be in an energetic space. And that's what I think is so important when you start looking at wellness and you start looking at sustainability and these new requirements, because you will be energized to have a strong workforce once you take all the feedback from the time of resilience.
No, that's wonderful. Yeah, I've worked in a series of different workplaces over time. Old-fashioned, more current, kind of the adaptable space now that you described in one of the last slides as well. When you focus on some of your diversity efforts and you kind of try to be as welcoming as you can, do you find inclusivity perhaps more challenging than diversity, or does one always lead to another? Because you obviously paired them for your discussion. I was curious, do you ever compartmentalize them, or are they always kind of together?
I like to put them together. Sorry, we have someone vacuuming outside right now, or doing the lawn outside right now, so that's a little loud. But I like to pair them together, but diversity does not equal inclusion. Oh my goodness. Diversity does not equal inclusion. So you can have a very diverse set of environments, and if you look at hotels in general, they are very diverse. That does not mean that their space is inclusive. Even if you have people from all different backgrounds, all different categorizations, if your environment doesn't allow every single voice to be heard and welcomed, then you don't have an inclusive environment. And I think it's very important to recognize that. And I always advise organizations, especially now that they're starting to look for diversity on external ways, especially with recruitment, I say, before we even look externally, how inclusive is your environment? Because you can attract talent that's diverse and give them everything that they want to hear. But if they get to your environment and your environment's not inclusive, then they're not going to stay, and you're going to have the same turnover problem. So it's very important first to reflect and evaluate, what does your space look like? How does it feel? Is it welcoming? Are voices heard? Do people feel valued? And then really start to bring in more additions of diversity as you're looking at where are the opportunities.
Makes sense. Makes perfect sense. Hey, one last question. Given all of your human capital expertise, and certainly as part of your wonderful Laugh Through Life venture that you created, and you just kind of mentioned it. As you listen to employees kind of celebrate their diversity, their cultural competencies, and the like, how do you see that as a foundation, perhaps for advancement for these groups of people? Do you have any potential observations on because of the inclusivity, because of the welcomingness of the space that you have? Again, absenteeism that you were down, but how about tenure? People, because you always hear about the age brackets. Oh, it's 3 years and out, they change jobs. Are you seeing, perhaps because of all those efforts, employees and the engagement and the energy staying longer and having perhaps even longer term opportunities for career advancement at these organizations?
Absolutely. I mean, organizations have to really reflect on what diversity initiatives they have in place, and do they have it tied to dollars? Because at the end of the day, this is not just about a feel good. This is actually, there's a return on investment. And it's not a hard concept to grasp. I like to explain this to organizations. When you look at hashtag foodie and you look at the best restaurants in the world, they're usually a collaboration of a lot of different types of ingredients and foods. It's not just one. And this is how we've gotten to be such a foodie culture around the entire world. And organizations haven't gotten there yet. They haven't valued the different diversity of thought of everyone bringing in different perspectives. And what does that mean to propel their innovation? What does that mean to propel all of their ideas, efficiencies? It's such an opportunity, and it's something that we've seen now in classrooms. And if you talk to a lot of professors, you'll see that constantly. They'll say, because of these diversity of thought and so many different people coming from different backgrounds, we've changed our learning curriculum. We've changed our classrooms, how it's set up. We've changed so much, but organizations have been a lot slower for that. And that's their opportunities. They can learn from all of these different classroom settings and how they've made those adjustments to really say, this is how you can propel your organization. And this is the dollars that it's not only saving, but also, you know, what you're making for your organization. And that's super important.
Very, 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 very valid points. Very valid. I particularly liked your daylight comment, because here in New York, after decades of waiting, we finally opened up the Moynihan train station in the old post office across from Madison Square Garden. Penn Station was always this subterranean kind of, after they knocked down the original one, it's just all of these subterranean kind of like passageways and things. And now a big part of the new train station is natural light. So when you're waiting 35 minutes for a delayed train, at least now you're at least you're getting some sunshine maybe on the top here to pick up your mood a little bit. Well, listen, Rebecca, this was wonderful. What a fabulous presentation. Congratulations on all your good work and your career. I mean, these were some tremendous insights for us. Sustainability is so important, diversity and inclusion, the workplace of the future, you know, ROI on the decisions and the like as you make these. So we really congratulations on your work, and thank you for joining us today. We will have this available as a recording for our audience members, so probably in the next day or so we can certainly go back and look at it. And thank you for your time today, and best of luck in the future. And we hope to see you again soon, okay?
Thank you so much.
Take good care. Stay well.
Thank you too. Take care.
Thank you.